Morant with a running start. Elevates. Oh, it dunks. Oh, my goodness.
Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn his heat. It's gone. Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it. A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took exception.
Adams going long. Morant. He hit it. John Morant. Insanity.
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. My name is Keith Parish. On today's episode, I will wrap up All-Star Weekend from a Grizzlies perspective. I will go over three stats that I think pose three big questions for the final 25 games for the Grizzlies. And then I'm going to go over some lineups that I want to see in the Grizzlies' final 25 games and some that you want to see. I ask, what's a lineup that you want to see the Grizzlies try out that they haven't really tried so far this year? A lot of these are going to be Luke Kennard trade inspired. So we'll talk about all of that stuff. I hope you're having a great All-Star break, able to relax, do something besides watch basketball. The All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City, the Grizzlies were very, very involved. Of course, the Grizzlies getting two All-Stars for the first time ever in the same game. But outside of the basketball, which honestly there wasn't really much actual basketball, outside of it, I hope you saw on social media, through the Grizzlies accounts, through the Grind City Media accounts, through the writers and reporters and podcasters who were there, you could see a lot of stuff that the Grizzlies were doing. There was some funny media day availability stuff where Jaren Jackson Jr. was asked which Grizzlies player would he be least likely to let watch his kids. He said Jr., Kenneth Lofton Jr. There's a funny clip of Jaren saying, it was hard to pick up Kenneth Lofton Jr. after the Rising Stars game. It was like a kid at carpool, and so no, he would not let Jr. babysit his kids. Also, of course, there was the pop-up shop where the Ja ones were available. Nike built a giant snow and ice sculpture called Mount 12ski, which is unbelievable looking. It was this huge snow ice mountain with Ja and a pair of shoes and a grizzly head. It was really cool looking. There was a life-size Ja model trapped in a block of ice. So, what's not to love about that? The Grizzlies were involved in the actual game. The actual game was not that much fun to watch. Jamorant and Jaren Jackson Jr. were on the court together on opposing teams. So that part was fun. Obviously, we draw the parallels to the Rising Stars game where they got to play together. That was super cool to see a few years later, them both being in the main All-Star game. They both had some spectacular dunks during the game, but didn't play that much. Jaren played 8 minutes, scored 6 points. Ja, I think, played 20 minutes, scored 6 points. I got to say, the one thing interesting about the basketball game, not that I'm going to try to analyze the ball that happened, I could care less, but I am intrigued how Ja Morant is not more, assertive in these All-Star games. He's now a 2-time All-Star game starter. He's a point guard. You think about the bigs, Jaren, how's he going to get the ball? This goes back to the previous Grizzlies All-Stars. How is Zach Randolph or Marc Gasol or Pau Gasol going to get the basketball? Well, Ja Morant's the starting point guard for these All-Star games, but he kind of just takes a back seat, is not super assertive. He scored 6 points in the game this year, scored 6 points in the game last year. The most points ever scored by a Grizzly in an All-Star game is still Marc Gasol with 10. So maybe Ja just really likes relaxing and doesn't care about, gunning for individual stats and accolades like some of the other players. Jason Tatum had a huge game. He also shot 31 field goal attempts. So I find it interesting, or just that's something that I don't understand why Ja's not a little bit more involved in the game, but of course it doesn't really matter. The most entertaining portion for me of All-Star Weekend in regards to the Grizzlies was the actual player draft before the game. Like, the Grizzlies weren't involved in All-Star Saturday night. The Rising Stars game was weird and confusing, and Kenneth Lofton Jr. played with the G League players, and what am I supposed to say? His team lost. But the actual player draft I thought was very, very interesting. Unfortunately, Jaren was the last pick among the reserves. You hate to see that. I kind of thought he might go ahead of some of the other guys who got taken, but of course he was the last pick among the reserves. Giannis drafted Ja. Giannis tried to draft Ja twice. He took him very high in the reserve picks, but of course Ja was no longer a reserve. He was elevated into the starting role with Steph Curry being unavailable for the game. And then Giannis took him pretty early, drafting the starter. So it was cool to see Giannis give jamorant some love there and his interest in playing with him. I thought that was cool. And then, of course, Team Giannis gets the win. But I guess that goes as a positive thing for jamorant. I don't know. The game clearly didn't matter. But the Grizzlies were honored there. Ja and Jaren were very involved in off-the-court stuff, and it was a great moment, I think, in the history of the Grizzlies franchise. Now, Jaren said he's going to go decompress for a day, do a little meditation, is what he said, and then, of course, the team gets back at it on Thursday night. Of course, there's those watch parties in Memphis and in Nashville. I'll be hosting that one in Nashville at Noble's Beer Hall at 6:30. And the Grizzlies, all right, second half of the season, not even the second half of the season, they've already played 57 games. So the final third of the season, less than a third of the season, kicks off on Thursday with a big game, and the Grizzlies' schedule is hard. Straight up, it's hard. They start off with this road game against the 76ers, a team ahead of them in the overall NBA standings. They have a home game on Saturday where they host the Nuggets. The Nuggets, of course, the 1 seed in the Western Conference. And then after that, it just keeps going. They have a road trip coming up. Their next 11 games, 8 of them are against playoff teams. 6 of them are on the road. And 2 of the 3 non-playoff opponents are the Lakers. They have to play the Lakers twice, a very desperate Lakers team, and a new-look Lakers team that picked up some reinforcements near the trade deadline. So the Grizzlies' next 10 games at the 76ers, home for the Nuggets, home for the Lakers, and then at Rockets, at Nuggets, at Clippers, at Lakers, back home for Warriors, back home for Mavericks, and then at the Mavericks, then at the Heat. That is a gauntlet of a schedule. And now, there are some questions, I think, for this Grizzlies team. They have not played incredibly well for a while, and there are some stats that I have identified that might be meaningless. Stats can be misleading. We know this. Stats lie, all right? So I'm going to say some stats that I have found, because with this All-Star break, it's some time to dive into lineup stats, which I really enjoy doing, and I'm looking at player combinations. I'm looking at some other overall stuff. Some of these things I've mentioned before on the show, but I want to re-highlight them as painting them as these are things that concern me. Maybe you can tell me they're not concerning, and I guess that sets up the question. I guess a question can be, we can look at the stat and say, like, is this anything? Does this mean anything? Is this something to be worried about? So let's start with these 3 stats. First of them, the first of these stats that I'll start with. This season, the Grizzlies are winless when their opponent makes 17 or more three-pointers. I'm not sure if I ever said that on the show. I know I said it in one of my Grizz Minute videos. The Grizzlies are 0-10 this season when their opponent makes 17 or more threes. Is that stat meaningful? It's kind of random. I think it means something. I'm looking at the best teams in the NBA. I think the best teams in the NBA, and I think consensus is right now, the best teams in the NBA are the Bucks, the Celtics, the Nuggets, and probably the Suns. The Bucks are 6-3 when their opponents make 17 or more threes. The Celtics are 2-4. The Nuggets are 4-2. The Suns are 2-2. The Grizzlies are 0-10. Now, if you want to console yourself with other notable teams who have not won a game when their opponent makes 17 or more threes, the Cavs are 0-8. The Cavs are a very, very good team. The Mavericks are 0-5. The Warriors are 0-4. If you want to create a really fun stat, you say the Warriors, Cavaliers, Mavericks, and Grizzlies combined are 0-27 when their opponents make 17 or more threes. I think this is the thing, and I think it's something to be concerned about. And it's honestly why I might be docking the Grizzlies, where I don't really feel like they're an elite contender anymore. I felt that way a month ago. I don't feel that way anymore. I think they're a rung beneath, like the Bucks, the Celtics, and the Nuggets. I think in the playoffs, you're going to play teams who are going to hit 17 three-pointers in a game. You're going to go up against these elite offenses that can drain lots and lots of three-pointers. By the way, last season in the playoffs, the Grizzlies were 0-3 when their opponent made 17 or more threes. The inability to keep up from the three-point line, which has been a theme of the entire season, I think that's a little bit of a problem. It is just a random stat, but it's one that I find a tiny bit concerning. A second stat that has also contributed to me thinking of the Grizzlies as a rung beneath the other top contenders is that the Grizzlies' half-court offense is still really bad. That's not really a stat. I apologize. Here's the stat. The Grizzlies are 22nd in half-court offense, according to Cleaning the Glass. That is despite the Grizzlies being a really good offensive rebounding team. Offensive rebounding points that you get contribute to your half-court stats. Even with being a very, very good offensive rebounding team, one of the best in the NBA, the Grizzlies are still 22nd in points per possession in the half court. Now, the Grizzlies have the second fewest half court possessions. They push the pace to get transition opportunities. They get those steals and turnovers and thus get out in transition more than most teams. But in the playoffs, you think it's going to slow down, and the half court offense has not improved from last year. And this is despite Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. both taking, I think we could call them leaps this season. At the very least, they're mini leaps. Jaren and Bane are much better this season, and yet the half-court offense is still bad. The only playoff team with a worse half-court offense than the Grizzlies, it's the Heat. They're just one spot behind the Grizzlies. I don't think you can advance very far in the playoffs. I don't think you can make it to the conference finals with a half-court offense this poor. Now, tempering all of these stats that I'm going to say is the issue that the Grizzlies have not been healthy this season. They've only played 11 games with their preferred starting lineup. So you could just be sitting out there screaming at me, hey, man, we haven't had our team. Well, that's fair. We didn't have our team last year either. If it's injury, bad luck, or just the option or the choice to be excessively careful with your players and to load manage or career manage, whatever you want to call it, the minutes and hold them out of games, second out of back-to-backs. This is 2 years in a row where the Grizzlies haven't had their full strength squad together. So you can console yourself, and I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm not going to tell you not to do that. I mean, I do it. When fully healthy, the Grizzlies are awesome. They're top-line players. They're very, very awesome. They're as good as any other team in the NBA. But beyond that, that becomes an issue. So maybe you can tell yourself that is it's going to be okay because the team will be healthy. Like, speaking of getting healthy, Steven Adams is hopefully coming back soon. We don't have a report whether or not Steven Adams will be available for the first game on Thursday after the All-Star break. It sounded like Drew Hill was saying, it feels like maybe not, but I don't know if that was any hard reporting. Just the sense around the team or the sense he was getting was that Steven Adams was not going to come right back. It has been 4 weeks since the team said Steven Adams was expected to miss 3 to 5 weeks. So he's not coming back on the early end of that. Maybe a lot of us thought he had kind of Wolverine healing capacity and would come back sooner. He's not coming back sooner. It's been 4 weeks, and he's still out. And, of course, a lot of the Grizzlies stats take a big hit without Steven Adams. Of course, their rebounding numbers and even their defense is much, much worse. A lot of that is not being able to get defensive rebounds. So they need Steven Adams. But concerning stat number 2, does this mean anything that the half-court offense is still bottom third in the NBA? I think it does mean something. You can tell me you disagree. That's fine. One positive aspect of the Grizzlies' half-court basketball is they do have the single best half-court defense. So that's good. That's good. And maybe in the playoffs, jamorant and Desmond Bane can elevate their games and crank out enough points, and Jaren can generate some free throws like he did in the Jazz game to save the Grizzlies in the half court. But the second stat I had was that the Grizzlies are still 22nd in half-court offensive rating, and I don't like it. I kind of hate it. Finally, my third and final stat that has me a little bit concerned. You can tell me if it's concerning or not. And also, this stat has some like corollaries that are, I think, very, very, very interesting that I won't go too deep into because I feel like it's a Pandora's box, and I want to avoid it. But the final stat that I looked at in the past couple of days that was a little surprising to me is the Grizzlies have a negative net rating when Jaren Jackson Jr. is off the court. The Grizzlies have been outscored this season when Jaren Jackson Jr. has been off the court. It's another way to say that. There are some related things to this. Of course, again, the injury concerns. Players have missed games. Related to it is, I think, everyone's concerns about the lack of progression from Zaire Williams. Also, the fact that David Roddy and Jake LaRavia haven't overtaken John Conchar in the rotation. And I say that as a John Conchar fan. I like John Conchar. Net rating god, John Conchar. He isn't even having a great season by his standards, yet still has a bunch of incredible lineup combinations. The Grizzlies are generally good when Conchar's on the court. But I think everyone assumed this team, this year, was going to get contributions from at least one of Zaire Williams, David Roddy, Jake LaRavia. Of course, in a lot of the Grizzlies' recent games, those three guys haven't even been with the team. They've been assigned to the Memphis Hustle, playing in G League games. I feel like that's a pretty big disappointment for this season. But because of that, we highlight that, hey, the depth hasn't been that good. Hopefully, the acquisition of Luke Kennard will help that. But this year, the Grizzlies have a +5 net rating overall, but when Jaren Jackson Jr. is off the court, they have a -0.2. So it's very, very narrow, but still negative. This is the team that we think is elite, that we want to highlight their depth as being one of the strengths. Last year, when Jaren Jackson Jr. was off the court, the Grizzlies were +3.7 points better than their opponent per 100 possessions. This year, -0.2. And the related stat that I find extremely interesting, and I don't want to dive into it yet because, I don't know, I feel like it can get us into trouble. But here's a stat related to the Grizzlies' numbers with Jaren off the court that I think is, I don't know, eyebrow-raising. It is when Jaren Jackson Jr. is off the court and jamorant's on the court, the Grizzlies' net rating this season is just +0.6 of a point per 100 possessions. Like, I was doing all my two-man lineup combinations, my three-man lineup combinations, and when you do that, you see that everything is amazing with Jaren Jackson Jr. He's a cheat code for lineup combinations. And so then I'm like, all right, I just got to see what every player on the Grizzlies' net rating is when they don't play with Jaren Jackson Jr., because Jaren Jackson Jr. is a cheat code. And I'm seeing, all right, Steven Adams without Jaren Jackson Jr., the Grizzlies are 7 points better than their opponent, +7.2 points per 100 possessions better than their opponent. So Steven Adams, good net rating without Jaren. Desmond Bane, +7 points, good net rating. Dylan Brooks, +4.3, pretty good. Santialdama, +1.1. We haven't gotten to jamorant yet. John Conchar, +0.9, which again, it's basically even. Then we get to Ja, +0.6. Now, the problem with all stats, the problem with lineup stats is they're all interconnected. And, you know, Ja's playing a lot of his minutes with Jaren because they both start together. So there's not that huge of a sample size of Ja without Jaren, even though Jaren missed, games at the beginning of the year. But I feel like Ja's numbers should be better. And so now I look at last season. Last season, when Ja was on the court and Jaren was off the court, the Grizzlies were +1.6 per 100 possessions. So this year, they're +0.6 with Ja on the court and no Jaren, which is about a 43-win team. That's the point differential of a 43-win team. Of course, you see that's basically even. Even would be, 41-41 team. So this year, the Grizzlies with Ja on the court and Jaren off, they're about a 43-win team. Last year, with Ja on the court and Jaren off, they're about a 45-win team. That's not very good. We all remember last season the eye-popping numbers of when Tyus Jones played and jamorant didn't play and the Grizzlies won. I don't remember what it was. Was it like they were like 19-2 at one point when Tyus Jones played and they were blowing teams out constantly? And last season we're asking the questions like, hey, when Tyus Jones plays and Ja doesn't, the Grizzlies turned out being far more likely to blow teams out. They had the same number of 20-point wins in like Tyus's 20 starts as they did in Ja's 60 starts. These numbers are approximate. I didn't write them down or go find out what they were last year. The reverse, by the way, Jaren Jackson Jr. stats without jamorant. This year, Jaren Jackson Jr. on the court with no jamorant, the Grizzlies are plus 5.5 points per 100 possessions. That's a 54-win team pace, or the point differential of a team you expect to win 54 games. Last year, they were plus 9.3. Jaren Jackson Jr. without Ja. That's a 61-win team pace. So repeating the stat that I'm just going to say, this is interesting, I don't know what it means. Jamorant without Jaren Jackson Jr. this year, plus 0.6 points per 100 possessions. Last year, plus 1.6 points per 100 possessions. Jaren Jackson Jr. without Ja this year, plus 5.5 points per 100 possessions. Last year, plus 9.3. So do those stats mean anything to you? For me, they have me kind of worked up that like, all right, we're not as good as I hoped we would be. And the bench, of course, you can highlight some stuff there. The bench hasn't contributed at the same level we hoped. And then maybe, I don't know what it means. I don't know what the jamorant stats mean. If it's just the particular lineups that he's asked to carry without Jaren. Like that could be a part of it. Is Ja having to carry some worse lineups once like Jaren Jackson Jr. comes off the court? Because as we know, we don't want to get carried away with individual net rating and even 2-man, 3-man lineup data. It can all be a little bit misleading. But anyways, you guys gave me some ideas of some player combinations, some lineups that haven't been used so far this season that you want to see over the final 25 games, and I'll go over some of those right after this short break. All Grizz all the time. Stay connected and follow at MemGrizz and at Grind City Media across all social channels, including Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for breaking news, one-of-a-kind content, and all the perspectives you won't find anywhere else. By the way, putting a bow on that individual player net ratings when playing without Jaren Jackson Jr. I didn't get to the guys at the bottom of the list, just for informational purposes only. Tyus Jones, minus 3.6 net rating without Jaren. David Roddy, minus 4.2. Xavier Tillman, minus 6.2. Brandon Clark, minus 9 net rating when playing without Jaren. Of course, when he plays with Jaren, they're double digits positive. Quite the mighty swing. And then Zaire Williams, minus 11.7. playing without Jaren Jackson Jr. All right, so I asked you guys what are some lineups you want to see after the All-Star break. Here's mine that I want to see. I want to see some non-point guard minutes. I want to see Bane and Kennard get a chance to be the backcourt when Ja's off the court. Ideally, I would pair this with the front court combination I want to see the most, which is Santialdama at the 3 with Jaren and Brandon. Of course, as you know, as a Grits and Grinds listener, the real lineup I just want to see more of is the death lineup. Ja and Bane and Dylan and Brandon and Jaren. But some twists off that, and I think some twists that you guys suggested, are you guys want to see something similar to that, but you want to see Aldama in for Dylan Brooks. And hey, no argument there. The way Aldama has been shooting the basketball, I definitely want to see more small forward minutes. But something I specifically want to see that I think we might have a chance of seeing is Luke Kennard and Desmond Bane in the backcourt together with Aldama, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. I don't know if it's super likely that it happens, but I think there is a chance that it happens. I also want to see some Ja just with Kennard and Bane lineups. I think we've gotten like one possession of that. You assume when you got Kennard in the trade that, all right, we're going to space the court with Ja plus Desmond plus Luke Kennard plus something else. It could be really cool. Of course, I think putting Steven Adams in one of those lineups to get the screener and offensive rebounder, a guy to help maybe cover up the rebounding deficiencies of those other guys, that would be a really cool combination. And, of course, that's a combination a lot of you guys suggested. Here's some of your suggestions. OK Vontae suggested the idea of very similar to mine, where Bane and Kennard are in the backcourt with Santi at the 3, Jaren at the 4, and then Steven Adams at the 5. I'm in. I think it's a very interesting lineup. I will say my guess is we never get to see that. The idea of doing a no point guard lineup, I think that the odds are small, but possible. I think combining that with Santi playing a 3 alongside Jaren and Steven Adams is 4 and 5. I think both those things happening on their own aren't that likely, so them happening all together for this 5-man lineup, I would say the odds are remote. Also, Vontae wants Luke Kennard in Dylan Brooks' spot with the starting lineup, and I think we can all say we're interested with that. Seeing Ja and Desmond with Luke Kennard plus Jaren and Steven Adams. That lineup, I think we definitely will see. Vontae also suggested Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Santi with Jaren. And we've actually gotten that lineup. They've played 2 whole possessions together. But Tyus and Bane and Kennard and Santi have been playing together in both games. So I think we will definitely get more of this specific lineup, which was Tyus, Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, Santialdama with Jaren Jackson Jr. I think we're going to get that in the coming weeks. Parker Fleming from SB Nation Grizzlies suggested Tyus Jones, Desmond Bane, Jake LaRavia, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson Jr. lineup. He wants to see more of that. It has already played this season, he notes. It's played 20 possessions together. They outscored their opponent 22-8, which clocks in at a hilarious plus 110 net rating. Of course, the cheat code there is Desmond Bane plus Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. together for the season. Those 3 guys have a plus 16.1 net rating. So Parker wants to see more of this specific lineup with LaRavia playing the 3. Yeah, I got no problems with seeing LaRavia have another go at it. I mean, notably, I talked about how the disappointment is that like Roddy and LaRavia and Zaire haven't kicked Conchar out of the rotation. Roddy and LaRavia have had some really strong minutes. They've had some really strong moments, and their first 25 games, where it's like, oh, these guys are rookies, were a lot different than their next 25 games. Whenever they got in, I think they had some really strong stuff they showed. So I think we will see that lineup again, Parker, and I do like that one. Tanner Cook, he wants an adjustment to the rotation, to the substitution pattern. He wants to see Dylan Brooks and Steven Adams sub out first instead of Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson Jr. He wants Clark to come in earlier so we get more of those Brandon and Jaren minutes together. And then he thinks using Steven Adams and Dylan Brooks on the second unit could be a way to bolster that. He cites the strong net ratings of Dylan and Steven. This is a good time to remind you, just adding guys with positive net ratings to a negative lineup doesn't actually mean anything. We don't know. Net ratings just reflect what has happened. It has no predictive qualities. I don't know. But I do agree with Tanner that a bench lineup where you have Tyus and Luke Kennard and Santialdama, your 3 bench guys, paired with Dylan Brooks and Steven Adams is very good. I like that a lot. Now, Steven Adams' substitution patterns has always been, I think for the most part, it's always been he starts the game, comes out, then finishes the half. And so I don't think he necessarily wants to be one of those, like, he comes in for a little bit, goes out, comes back in for a little bit, goes out, comes back in. But I do think maybe playing Steven the first 5 minutes of the game or so, subbing him out, then having him start the second quarter with the second unit. And this honestly might uncork Tyus Jones. Having Tyus Jones have that big screener, someone who can play a 2-man game with, that might be helpful for Tyus' little slump. Oh, by the way, congratulations to Tyus Jones and his wife. They had a baby. Possibly, this is not actual basketball analysis. This is just stupid podcaster talk. But hey, maybe the Tyus Jones slump is going to be over now that his child has been born. This baby girl is here. He gets that extra dad boost. Maybe off the court stuff, thinking about the pregnancy, was weighing down his on-court play. Again, that's not basketball analysis. I'm just making talk, but congratulations to Tyus Jones and his partner for the birth of their baby girl. But Tanner, I like this suggestion. I do think playing Tyus Jones and Luke Kennard with Dylan Brooks, as you're helping bolster that second unit. Steven and Dylan with Santi, Luke Kennard, and Tyus Jones. I love that 5-man unit. Good work. Titan86 says he wants Santialdama at the 3 with the starters. I mean, you got to consider it. with how smooth santialdama's three-point stroke has been, we got to get more Santi small forward minutes. I think Ja, Dez, Santi, Jaren, Steven Adams is something worth exploring even more. JD 1973 wants my death lineup with Aldama instead of Dylan. Yeah, sure. Absolutely, 100% in. A Twitter handle not appropriate for my G-rated show suggested Desmond Bane, Luke Kennard, like I said, the non-traditional point guard backcourt with Santi, Jaren, and Steven Adams. I think I might have already said that. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. Vontae suggested that one as well. Again, I like the idea. I am just dubious we will get a chance to see it. Hot Wing Jack suggested, again, my same lineup that I picked of Kennard and Bane with Aldama, Brandon Clark, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Grizzlies film, once again, suggest some non-point guard lineups. We're all sensing this theme. I think a lot of it is related to Tyus Jones' slump, which I hopefully, which fingers crossed he's going to bust out of. He thinks Bane and Kennard, and then either Conchar or Brooks at the three, which again, I like that. Those are things we need to try out more of. Again, I'm intrigued by it, even though Bane and Kennard are not primary creators. They're not the ideal ball handlers. Maybe together, they could piece it together. And, yeah, I'm interested in that in non-jamorant minutes. And then finally, Grizzlies Jet. He wants jamorant with Luke Kennard, Desmond Bane, Santi Aldama, and Jaren Jackson Jr. I think that's the Grizzlies' best shooters. That's their best shooting lineup. I mean, I guess Tyus is a better shooter than Ja, but we want to have Ja's obviously elite basketball skill, and he's an okay shooter. I think having Ja, Kennard, Bane, Aldama, and Jaren Jackson Jr. together is, yeah, let's give it a go. I think we got to try this at some point over the final 25 games, and I think they will. So anyways, thanks for those submissions, everyone who sent in a lineup suggestion. I do think one thing they're going to focus on more. I hope so. We've seen it increase more and more. I mentioned this on the last show. It's those Jaren and Santi minutes. They've played 120-something possessions together. Their net rating is plus 31, if I remember correctly. I know it's over plus 30 per 100 possessions. So I think we're going to get more Santi and Jaren minutes. I'm hopeful we get more Santi at the 3 minutes. I want sizing up. I think we're going to get sizing down. I think we're going to get more Bane at the 3 with Kennard, as hopefully that shooting can solve some of those issues. Maybe we'll win a game with that added shooting. We'll win a game when our opponent makes 17 or more three-pointers, fingers crossed. But it's going to be an exciting finish to the season. The next 11 games are going to be huge, and it's a daunting schedule. I don't want to put a prediction on it because I'm not super optimistic right now. But whenever I doubt this Grizzlies team, they normally come through with some big wins. Also, that big game on Saturday against the Nuggets. The Grizzlies are 8-0 this year on Friday or Saturday night home games. So hopefully the Grizzlies crowd will be electric for that one. Local people go out, support the Grizzlies, and let's get that W. Anyways, thanks to everybody who listens to these shows. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel for Grits and Grinds. Tell other Grizzlies fans about the show. Anyways, hope you're having a great Tuesday. See some of you guys at the watch party on Thursday, and I'll talk to you soon. Go Grizz!